In the year 1906, a wealthy couple, Charles and Eleanor Whitmore, along with their 2 young children, Samuel and Lillian, moved into the sprawling and labyrinthine Winchester Mystery House in San Jose, California. The mansion was an architectural oddity, a sprawling enigma with doors that opened to walls, staircases that led to nowhere, and rooms that twisted and turned as if designed by a madman. Charles, a successful businessman, had purchased the house as a symbol of his prosperity, a place where his family could thrive. But the house had other plans. From the moment they moved in, strange occurrences began to plague the family. At first it was subtle, a soft whisper in the dead of night, the sensation of being watched, and the cold spots that seemed to follow them from room to room. Samuel, the eldest at 8, was the first to notice something was wrong. He would wake in the night, trembling and drenched in sweat, claiming to see shadowy figures moving through the walls, their hollow eyes fixed on him. Eleanor dismissed his fears as childish nightmares, but soon Lillian, only 5, began to speak of the sad lady who wept in the corners of her room. The figure, according to Lillian, had long dark hair and wore a dress that shimmered like tears. Eleanor grew uneasy but kept her fears to herself, not wanting to alarm her husband. Days turned into weeks, and the house seemed to grow more malevolent. Doors would slam shut on their own, cutting off rooms that had been accessible moments before. Mirrors would crack and splinter without reason, their surfaces reflecting not the family's faces but those of strangers, pale, gaunt figures with eyes full of despair. One night, Charles awoke to the sound of sobbing. He found Eleanor standing at the foot of their bed, her eyes wide with terror. "I saw them, Charles," she whispered, her voice shaking. They were in the room with the children. Frantic, they rushed to the children's rooms. Samuel was in a deep, unnatural sleep, his face twisted in fear. Lillian was awake, her eyes wide, staring at the ceiling where a shadowy figure hovered, its mouth open in a silent scream. Charles reached out to touch her, but as he did, the figure vanished, and Lillian let out a blood-curdling scream before collapsing. The next morning, Lillian was feverish, her small body racked with violent tremors. Samuel remained in a comatose state, his breathing shallow. Desperate, Eleanor and Charles sent for a priest, hoping to rid the house of whatever evil had taken hold. Father O'Malley, a grizzled man with deep-set eyes, arrived that afternoon. As he entered the house, he crossed himself, his face pale. "This place," he murmured, "is touched by something wicked." Father O'Malley began the ritual, sprinkling holy water and reciting prayers in every corner of the house. As he approached the children's rooms, the air grew thick with a suffocating pressure. The walls seemed to pulse, and the lights flickered wildly. Lillian's fever spiked, and she began to convulse. Samuel's body jolted upright, his eyes rolling back in his head as an otherworldly voice erupted from his throat, screaming, "Get out! You do not belong here." The priest continued, his voice trembling as he commanded the spirits to leave. The house groaned, the very walls seeming to buckle under the weight of the ritual. Suddenly, a deafening silence fell. The air stilled, and for a moment, it seemed as though the evil had been vanquished. But then, Lillian let out one final, agonizing cry before falling limp. Her tiny chest no longer rose and fell with breath. She was gone. Eleanor collapsed, her wails of grief echoing through the cursed halls. Samuel, too, was forever changed. Though he awoke from his trance, he was never the same, his once bright eyes now dull and haunted, his body frail and weak. The doctors could find no explanation for his decline, but Eleanor knew the truth: the house had claimed him, just as it had claimed Lillian. Charles, overcome with guilt and grief, sold the house and moved his broken family far away. But the Winchester Mystery House remained, its dark corridors echoing with the cries of the lost and the damned. The spirits of the house were never truly exorcised, and those who ventured too close could still hear the whispers of the dead, calling them into the endless maze where the past could never rest.